Do you know what Bobby Heenan did after old squeeze Lex Luger had turned his back on him to become Mr. America? He watched the former narcissist slam Yokozuna on the USS Intrepid and instantly claimed it was a hip toss. As the rules had stated that challengers had to pick up the man from Japan in such a manner, the brain instantly said it should be ruled null and void. What a damn genius. It's just one example of wrestlers coming up with amazing reasons as to why someone else should lose, and this goes for when those actually in the match do the same. In the world of make-believe, you can have fun when you don't come out the other end the winner because you knew what the deal was beforehand. Different if you're in a sporting team going into a major cup final, but when performance is key to the pageantry around it, you should turn it up to 11. Some wrestlers are so good at it they actually shine in defeat, so let's look at some wonderful reasonings as to why someone wasn't able to walk away from the ring with their hands raised. I'm Simon from What Culture. Remember to subscribe, and this is the 10 best ever excuses for losing a wrestling match. Number 10, Santino Marella wasn't ready. Was there ever a better comedy figure in WWE than Santino? Arguably not. Everything he did by throwing himself into it full hog, and because of that, he was darn hilarious. I'm still sad he didn't win the world title at the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view in 2012. I thought it would have been a moment for the ages. A few years prior to this, he was still winning fans over when he charged to the ring at the Royal Rumble 2009, looking like he was ready to take the thing by storm. Unfortunately, Santino was a little too up for this because as soon as he slid in the ring, Kane spied him from afar and closed him right over the top rope. The official time was 1 second. Anybody else probably wouldn't have made the most of this, but Marella's protest that he wasn't ready, an excuse a child uses when they lose at Mario Kart, meant it didn't matter, he'd just broken a record nobody wants. The crowd laughed their asses off as they remembered why they liked this guy so much to begin with. A testament to both the individual and the character, I am always alright with spots like this. Better than Santino being a ghost in the thing, or worse, sat in the back, because nobody could come up with any ideas for him. Number 9, Chris Jericho cries conspiracy. When you think about it, Chris Jericho has basically spent 2 decades throwing out catchphrases and one-liners that always hit their mark. It's hard to come up with one, and Y2J has about 46. Even that nickname I just said counts. Arguably, he was no better at this than when he was on top of his powers in WCW in 1998. And then he was kind of allowed to do whatever the hell he wanted. After losing the Cruiserweight title to Dean Malenko had shocked the world by returning under a mask at Slamboree, Jericho didn't mince his words. This was a conspiracy, and he was going to prove that it went right to the top of the company, and yes, that included Ted Turner. How else was Malenko allowed to get involved in this fashion? Chris came across like a total dick, which was the intent, and he was so determined to get this sorted, he decided to take it to the President of the United States. So he headed off to Washington, D.C. as we were treated to a series of ridiculous skits as he tried to get Bill Clinton to sort it out. Obviously, Jericho was unsuccessful, which led him to believe that Clinton was also in on this too. Even when you watch it today, it's hard to figure out why World Championship Wrestling weren't more keen to let the man who loves the bubbly enter the main event scene. Clearly had what it took. Number 8, Hulk Hogan cries for help. Hulk Hogan has said on many occasions that when he lost his WWE title to the Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania 6, he already had a plan in mind. Not only would he kick out at 3.2 seconds after being pinned, but he would also make sure to hand the championship to the Warrior so that all eyes in the arena were on him. Sounds awful, but it worked, so make of that what you will. When he did manage to get his shoulder up just milliseconds too late though, he instantly looked to the skies and appeared to plead to a greater power to try and sort this all out. Not sure what the Hulkster expected to happen, unless he believed time travel was about to be born then and there. He was wrong. All of this was Hogan protecting his spot, which he did masterfully, and it didn't really feel like he lost given how he acted. Somehow, yes, people thought this was nothing to do with his skill as a wrestler. It was all down to some sort of spiritual magic working against him. You'd be well within your rights to assume Hulk had just been beaten by the better man, but I imagine the first person to tell you were wrong would be wearing red and yellow tights. Number 7, Ric Flair gets a taste of his own medicine. We all know that Ric Flair is the dirtiest player in the game. Doing whatever it takes to win, he took it a step further before he clashed with the Macho Man Randy Savage at WrestleMania 8 by getting in his opponent's head before the bell had even rung. Countless doctored photos that seemed to suggest Savage's wife, Miss Elizabeth, was having an affair with the Nature Boy were thrown in front of the Macho Man's face, with Randy not appreciating it. In fact, it drove him crazy. It meant when the match kicked off for real, Savage went nuts. This was of course Flair and then manager Mr. Perfect's plan, and it allowed Rick to get the upper hand and naturally start cheating as much as he could. Any way he could bend the rules he would, and it looked like Savage had made a terrible mistake. Instead, he was actually learning. After rolling Rick up, the Macho Man also grabbed a handful of tights to get the three, as if to remind Slick Rick that there's no actions without consequences. Flair was livid about this despite the obvious, and freaked out afterwards, claiming it was all utter bullshit. Only the 16-time world champion could have made this work like he did, and it's another example of why he was, ironically, the man. He could do anything. Number 6, Buff Bagwell blames the bookers. If you ever wanted to know why WCW died, this is as good a story as any. Back in October 1999, Buff Bagwell was told he was getting a push. It wasn't even the worst idea, as Buff did have a following, and with the right story we may be able to pull this off. Unfortunately, as was the way in the late 90s, World Championship Wrestling had to make it the most convoluted and stupid thing ever. Before he even had the match, Bagwell was telling us that he was the chosen one and that he had been told that exact words by management. Why then, fans asked, was he acting like a right moron when he fought La Parka just an hour later? Not only did he mock his own taunts, but the fight was awful, and it was all because of how Bagwell was behaving. Quite simply, wouldn't play ball. As it turned out, within the narrative, Buff had found out that he was booked to lose, so deliberately performed like an idiot in some kind of protest. It not only broke what wrestling is, but it meant his excuse was he was mad on screen because behind the scenes he had told he couldn't win, but that was also storyline. Don't worry if that hurts your brain, it hurts everybody's brain. Just bad all round, and we should never talk about it again. Number 5, Dana Brooke just admits she's gonna lose. When Dana Brooke accepted an open challenge from Ronda Rousey, she did so by revealing straight away that she would likely lose. That's a good attitude, Dana. Happening right in the middle of Ronda heading to WrestleMania, Brooke had a microphone in her hand before she tackled the baddest woman on the planet, and with a slight wobble in her voice said that she didn't really think she could win, and that she knew she wasn't some big-time fighter. Not only that, she was right. Rousey then proceeded to absolutely beat the hoo-ha out of her as if it was a legit brawl. To be fair though, Dana was so honest with all of this, or at least that's how she came across, that she did endear herself to the audience. If WWE had been so inclined to follow up on this, Brooke may be further along in her career, especially as most other wrestlers say she goes out of her way to work and improve in her own time. Outside of that, however, it was still someone we were meant to see as a wrestler going, yo, you're gonna smash me up, and then getting smashed up. Don't really know why you do that if you were so sure it was a terrible idea. Number 4, Big Show just wants to have fun. Inspired by Cyndi Lauper, I'm sure, after the Big Show hit a bit of a lull post-WrestleMania 2000, he found himself being used as a comedy figure quite quickly. Wasn't the worst thing in the world, as Show was actually quite apt at it, and seeing him as Val Venus, Rikishi, and The Godfather is still videos you can watch now and shake your head in the right way. Only in wrestling. Unfortunately, this soon manifested itself with him clocking up quite a big loss record, such as when he blew a tag team title shot as he teamed with Kurt Angle, because Show was too busy acting like Fat Bastard from the Austin Powers movies. Yeah, so old now, I'm gonna guess some people are gonna have to go look that up. Thankfully for him, he had one more gimmick he could parody, and that was Hulk Hogan. As we learned, even when someone dresses up as the Hulkster, they're allowed to crush their opponents, as Big Show did at Backlash 2000, where he owned Angle in no time at all, while pretending to be the Immortal One. Something to think about if you're trying to come up with a character right now. Just be Hogan is easy. Number 3, Zack Sabre blames Boris Johnson. The best thing about Zack Sabre Jr. is that he's so smooth in the ring and a nutbag outside of it. He never loses his cool when he's fighting, but if he gets defeated and somebody puts a microphone in his hand, you never know how he's gonna react. He could literally say anything. This was backed up when he couldn't get his momentum going in the 2019 New Japan G1 Climax and then lost the British Heavyweight Championship to Tanahashi at Royal Quest. His response? To tell everybody that it wasn't his fault and it was the imploding British government who are to blame, especially Prime Minister Boris Johnson. If it wasn't for Brexit and the Conservative Party, none of this would have happened, and he was sick and tired of having to deal with it all. Subsequent promos were equal parts hilarious and somewhat truthful, and it made Zack stand out a mile. Who else was doing stuff like this, even if there was the risk that it may be lost on some people? It was a tremendous way to remain topical while also trying to find a get out of jail free card for not being a great success in the ring. It rocked. Number 2, Steve Austin and Bret Hart don't actually lose. It's not like Stone Cold ever made a big deal about this, but that was the point. His rival Bret Hart did, and it's a trick that Vince McMahon has deployed numerous times throughout the years. Beginning when the Rattlesnake screwed Bret Hart out of the WWE title at the Royal Rumble and the Final Four pay-per-view, it struck a chord with the Hitman, who started to moan. A lot. The thing is, he was right in most of what he was saying, and because Hart felt like he had a proper gripe, he was great in the role. After all, he didn't win the title against Sid Justice because Shawn Michaels got involved. He didn't win the Royal Rumble because of the aforementioned Texan, who also cost him the big belt by smashing him with a chair when it was on the line against Sid. If anyone was being treated unfairly, it was the best there was, the best there is, and the best there ever will be. Bret couldn't figure out why WWE kept letting this happen, and while he had excuses, it wasn't what the fans wanted to hear, so they turned on him. Without this, there's no fuel for the feud with Austin, a fact that's made even more important when you remember how WrestleMania 13 went down. In an almost cruel twist, Stone Cold never actually lost to Bret because despite being caught in the sharpshooter, he passed out, causing the referee to just call it. The irony wasn't lost on the Hitman, who used all this to drive his character forward. And we wonder why wrestling was better back then. Number 1, Diesel blames the suits. Diesel did not have a good year as WWE Champion in 1995. Fans weren't buying it, and the financials showed that, leaving Bret Hart to take the title from him in his third attempt when he small packaged his way to victory. This made Big Daddy Cool mad, as it would, leaving him to beat up some referees and jackknife powerbomb Hart over and over again to underline how displeased he was. He may have been beaten fair and square, but he didn't see it that way, and he wanted to tell everybody why. This happened on Raw, where Kevin Nash blamed his gimmick and booking. Quite quickly, you realize the former champ actually believed what he was saying and was aiming all of this at one Vincent Kennedy McMahon. Clearly, Diesel didn't think he had been used in the right way, meaning that the downward line on the graph wasn't his fault. The best line came when he said Titan Suits, a reference at WWE, had seen him as a killer and then robbed him of all his weapons, and it certainly made Nash far more interesting than he had been previously. Before his time, some will say, and I think that may actually be fair.